You ready, everyone?
Yeah.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Helens Council Cabinet. This is our first since lockdown began. It's good to see you, and welcome to anyone who's tuning in online. I'd like to thank our staff for putting this together, facilitating the IT. Can I first of all as well welcome Councillor Andy Bowden to his first Cabinet meeting since taking up his post. And I want to thank Councillor Lynn Clark for all her work in Cabinet as well, and wish her the very best. And I also want to welcome Kath O'Dwyer, Lisa and Rob, who've joined us to senior management positions since our last Cabinet meeting, and you've already hit the ground running, as we'll see on item 4 in particular. So welcome everyone, and we're just going to go around and members are going to introduce ourselves so you know who it is that's taking part in the meeting and what our responsibilities are. So I'm David Baines, I'm the leader of the council, and I'll start with Councillor Bell.
Hello, Councillor Jeannie Bell. I'm member for Newton Ward and portfolio holder for community safety.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Hi, I'm Councillor Bond. I'm a member for Haydock and I am the portfolio holder for finance.
Councillor Bowden.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Bowden. I represent the ward of Parr and I'm Cabinet Member for Environmental Services.
Councillor Burns.
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Burns, Councillor representing Haydock and the Cabinet Member for Public Health, Leisure, Libraries, Arts and Heritage.
Councillor Charlton.
Hi, I'm Councillor Nova Charlton. I'm a ward member for Thatto Heath and the Cabinet Member for Protecting Young People.
Councillor Groucutt.
Good afternoon, I'm Kate Groucutt. I'm Councillor for Parr and Cabinet Member for Corporate Services, Estates and Communications.
Councillor McCauley.
Hi, I'm Richard McCauley, Thatto Heath Ward Councillor and Cabinet Member for Economic Regeneration and Housing.
Councillor Murphy.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Sue Murphy. I'm the Councillor for the Billington Semi Green Ward and Cabinet Member for Developing Young People. Thank you.
And Councillor Quinn.
Hi, I'm Marlene Quinn, Councillor for West Park Ward and Cabinet Member for Adult Health and Social Care.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Okay, item number 1 is apologies for absence. There are none. Item 2 is the minutes of the meetings held on the 26th of February and the 6th of March. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. 3 is declarations of interest from members. Are there any? And 4 is COVID-19 response. And I'm going to hand over to our new Chief Executive, Kath O'Dwyer.
Thank you, Leader. There's a presentation before Cabinet this afternoon, but just by way of introduction, you will be aware that we've taken a very robust and proactive approach to dealing with the pandemic here in St Helens. And as a council, we've been focusing on 4 particular areas of activity. The first one of those has been ensuring that we continue with business as usual so far as possible. The second is dealing robustly with the COVID crisis together with our partners, planning for recovery and reset post-COVID, and also continuing to focus on delivering against the Council's ambitions. So a heavy agenda for all concerned. And to that end, I would like to place on record, Leader, with your agreement, the Council's sincere thanks to our staff who have absolutely gone the extra mile in supporting our residents, being redeployed into key areas of service, working remotely and flexibly and engaging with our residents in new and innovative ways to ensure the Council can deliver to the people of St Helens. Next slide, please. Next slide, Joanne. I'll keep going. So the presentation will describe for members the approach we've taken in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, key areas of activity and our approach going forward. And you can see we've a range of slides that Rob and myself will present to you. In terms of our strengths, our approach to dealing with the pandemic has been based on the strengths and challenges that we faced as a borough prior to the crisis. So many of these facts will be well known to you. A growing economy with more residents in work than 5 years ago, a growing population, our location at the heart of the Northwest, an increase in homes in the borough over the past 5 years, a borough that is a safe place to live with lower than average crime rates, that's green and has quality parks and open spaces, and a council with a nationally recognised integrated health and social care service, which has been of tremendous advantage to us during this pandemic. But the challenges include an ageing population, relatively high levels of deprivation, lower life expectancy, lower numbers of people in work. Despite improvements, we still as a borough have low levels of attainment and skills, and ongoing high demand for children's social care services. And all of those key challenges have been even greater challenges within this pandemic. Thank you. So against that backdrop, the council has been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. To do so, we identified a set of principles to guide our response. So that was around supporting the most vulnerable, guiding people to the support that they need, ensuring residents receive the essentials they need, supporting organisations, groups and businesses, and preparing for the long term now, the plan for the organisation we must become post-COVID. Next slide, please. So as of the 21st of May, 741 cases of COVID were recorded in St Helens, and there's been 163 deaths of St Helens residents relating to the coronavirus up until the 8th of May. And our condolences go to each and every one of those families. Of those, 89, so 55% were in hospital, 68, 42% were in care homes, and 6, so 3% were at home. New cases of COVID in St Helens peaked in the week of the 29th of March, with 176 new cases that week. Numbers have continued to fall since that time, with just 17 new cases in the week of commencing the 3rd of May this year. Thanks, Joanne. So to deal with the pandemic, St Helens Council established a COVID-19 strategic group made up of senior leadership team and specialists in terms of our Director of Public Health, Director of Adult Social Care and representatives from the CCG and right across the council. The council's also actively participated in the Merseyside Resilience Forum emergency planning arrangements to ensure a focused and coordinated multi-agency response. And as part of those arrangements, both strategic and tactical coordination groups were established together with a range of subgroups and cells on which we as St Helens Council ensured senior officer representation. Next slide, please. So during the period since March, a major emergency was declared, as you know, and government have issued a huge amount of legislation, guidance and directions to local authorities and our partners. Officers of the council have ensured that our response has been in line with all of these changes, including arrangements for virtual council meetings, of which today's cabinet, of course, is an example. So during the time, the council has been focused on 4 key objectives: delivering services as usual wherever possible, dealing with the pandemic, driving the agenda forward to achieve our ambitions, and planning for the future. And I'd now like to hand over to Rob Huntingdon, who is the council's new Assistant Chief Executive, who will talk through in a little more detail our response to the coronavirus. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Kath. So there's quite a lot of information I'd just like to pass on to Cabinet in relation to activity really, and that's either new activity as a result of the pandemic and the way that we are working, or the way that we have been delivering services and continuing business as usual. Next slide please, John. One of the key I suppose main activities really has been how we are communicating, and we've been actively using social media, and which includes our own Facebook page and our Twitter account, to pass on key messages, important information to the public. We've also used video, the website, adverts in the local paper, stickers on bins, letters to residents, media releases, and you can see from the figures there that the increase in terms of reach, but also the numbers of posts that have been created as a result of the pandemic to inform the public is quite significant. In addition to that, there have been a number of online campaigns to raise awareness. So that's been domestic abuse, mental health, antisocial behaviour, behaviour in general, including social distancing, being a care hero, fostering, recycling, and a lot of that has been linked into what is becoming quite a strong brand really for St Helens, which is the hashtag St Helens Together approach. And then internally we've been developing regular newsletters for members of staff and regular communications, including dedicated coronavirus pages on the staff website and the intranet, and regular emails to all staff. And that will continue, and we will continue thinking about new ways of communicating with staff and communicating the messages out as we go on. Next slide, please, John. So I'm just going to talk. I'll pull out the highlights from each of these areas, but I think the first thing to really consider is testing and tracing. That's the agenda at the moment, and will be the agenda going forward as we work through recovery, and as we start bringing things back to a new normal or a normal. So on the 23rd of April, that's when there was the national announcement of the contact tracing service, and the Director of Public Health has been working closely with the Executive Director for People and other specialists to make sure that we understand what this means for us. And I think a point to raise for all members really is that we are actually leading the way in establishing our local offer, and there is a real expectation that the local offer needs to deliver, and I think we've got a great approach that's been developed via our Director of Public Health and colleagues to drive that forward. I think the other thing that is helping is the way that we are collaborating and the collaborative approach that is taking place to ensure that we actually co-design this test and trace capability so that it works for our communities and the communities of St Helens. So there's a lot of activity in testing and tracing, and it's evolving regularly and daily. Next slide, please, John. That also includes the offer for care homes, and also the pathways for testing, which include actually having the tests being carried out in the first place, but also where they then go to be understood in terms of the results. So local testing sites have been able to provide a much quicker appointments and results capability than national sites. And regionally, the talk at the moment is that Liverpool University will be used more effectively or in anger, as it could be seen, to deliver some of those results. Next slide, please, John. And just for information, really, here's a current table of the swabbing sites that exist in St Helens. So there's a number of mass testing sites in Haydock, in Manchester. There's some drive-through sites. Move to the next slide. Some satellite sites, some sites in hospitals. Next slide. And also home swabbing is an option. However, there is a sort of a risk assessment around that. It's not recommended for anyone dealing with vulnerable or shielded patients. Thank you. The next area is PPE. So it's quite evident from the national agenda and the regional and local agenda that both testing and tracing and PPE have been the two challenges and will continue to be the two challenges. The crisis has caused a huge surge in demand, an unforeseen surge in demand for PPE. And the principle that we've been taking is that we just need to keep our levels of supply up, and we also need to source where we can. So there have been there are sort of arrangements in place through the Merseyside Resilience Forum and a regional PPE cell, which fortunately we chair as well. So one of our assistant directors, Caroline Barlow, chairs that, which helps us understand and drive and influence the situation. But we also have a local PPE prioritisation group, which is around local stocks and the distribution and supply of that. So we receive some from the regional and we need to drive it at a local level. Next slide, please. And as you can see, there's quite a substantial amount of individual items that have been supplied. So we have 500,000 individual items of PPE have been supplied across all care providers, and it's split between the items there. And linking back to what I previously said, 13% of the region's Merseyside Resilience Forum supply is awarded to us as well. Next slide, please, Joanne. The next area really is our workforce, and I just echo what Cass said at the beginning of this presentation in terms of the work and the support and the hard work and the working very differently that they've all embraced and are supporting. So following the announcement on the 23rd of March, which again was unprecedented in terms of the lockdown, we actually asked all staff, except those in what would be essential services, to work from home and not go into their workplaces until further notice. That is still the principle that stands. We are currently risk assessing buildings to make sure that they are safe workplaces, but actually we don't want to advocate a return to the workplace pre-COVID, because we do actually want to change the way that we work as a result. And I think the key point for me and for the organisation really is that we are an organisation that is predominantly working remotely, and it's working well. There are a few outliers to that which we're addressing, but it's working well. So we need to amplify that way of working and use that to support any culture change that we wish to take forward. We have got a number of COVID-related absences within the workforce. So there's 376 against a total workforce of just over 6,000, and we have 11 employees currently diagnosed with COVID-19. 24 is the total number of employees who have been, with 13 now recovered. And we wish all those that have been diagnosed that may be suffering symptoms or will be suffering symptoms a quick recovery. And then there are a number of staff who we have redeployed on a temporary basis to support the response. So we've got 164 staff that are now redeployed to either support things like the community hub or other key services. And actually there's probably more of a requirement evolving around supporting public health with the contact tracing capability that we need. But the key thing that we are really clear about is the well-being of our staff. And there's a lot of engagement happening at the moment, and has been continuing to happen as we've been in this current situation of engagement with staff, either virtually and ongoing support provided as well. Next slide, please, John. So the next area is support for residents and communities, and I briefly touched on the St Helens Together approach that we've been taking, which we do wish to continue with. Next slide. So the St Helens Together requests via contact cares between the 6th of April and the 24th of May were around just 16,500. Interestingly, the majority of those were telephone calls to the helpline, with a smaller number emailing in for support. And there are currently, and this figure does change based on data that is released, but also our understanding of the wider vulnerabilities. But there are 12,726 residents of St Helens that are on the shielding list, and a further 59,000 that are on the wider vulnerable list. So that is a significant number. And then 760 registered volunteers have been helping with our response effort. And between 30th of March and the 24th of May, 892 parcels in total were delivered from the hub. 66% are shielded and 34% to the wider community vulnerable. So a significant effort from the community hub, and again, thanks to everybody that has been involved in that. It continues and will continue in its current form until at least the end of June. And we have secured Sutton Leisure Centre as the new hub base, so we can continue to operate that up until September. You'll also all be aware that we had the St Helens Together crowdfunding appeal. So the first phase of that raised over £85,000 from 147 backers, and that means that we can continue the offer from the hub until the end of June. And our colleagues in leisure have actually started delivering the parcels as of the 5th of May, taking over from volunteers and schools transport providers who are actually returning to their post-COVID roles. Next slide, please, John. Just a visual there of the leader and others at the hub. But what I just wanted to highlight here is that data is really key. I talked about the numbers on the shielded list, and there's just a little bit of a breakdown there against each of the wards in St Helens, and you can see that Parr, the town centre, Thatto Heath have the highest number of shielded individuals, and again, just to demonstrate that actually data is key when we start thinking about how we do respond, and we've been building up that level of intelligence in order to provide the right support. Next slide, please, John. In terms of children's social care, so from the 23rd of March to the 25th of May, we have actually seen a decrease in the number of contacts that have come into the department. So 30% decrease when compared to the same period in 2019. And the figures being 1,002 against 1,429. And also the reduction in the number of contacts received from local partners with schools is showing the greatest rate of reduction in contacts. The police continue to be the largest single agency that is contacting children's social services, and a third of all contacts are coming from the police in the current period, with domestic abuse being the top contact reason, followed by neglect. That notwithstanding, the social care service, children's social care service, does continue its normal business basically, and the workforce and all staff are either working from home and using the technology to support them in their roles. And on the next slide, there's just some examples of how they're embracing new ways of working to still continue to deliver that same level of service, such as child protection conferences still continue to be held. Visits are now completed either virtually via some of the technology that's available, or to the family home with allocated workers wearing PPE. risk assessments are carried out before any visits, and even visits are held in family gardens away from the family home to maintain social distancing rules where a visit is required. And there has, in order to build relationships and continue to build relationships, some social workers are also writing to children, and the children are writing back. So business as usual, but a bit more enhanced as well. And again, just some further examples, really, including our futures team with care leavers are being creative in how they continue to engage care leavers. Quizzes, live streams, key life skill sessions online and via video conferencing, and also our staff. So our teams are using the technology to have daily check-in sessions. It's helping them stay in touch with each other and give what is considered vital, practical and emotional support when it's needed. Next slide, please, Joanne. In terms of youth services, it wasn't actually last weekend, it was just earlier in May, but the services played concerts in the grounds of care homes, the Music and Cultural Education Partnership via that, and established a song for St Helens, so that had performances from local young people, and it was viewed by 7,000 people, which is wonderful to see. There's further work in terms of the career service and the post-16 team, currently just assessing economic impact on NEET for young people aged 16 plus, and we can all probably assume that actually the economic impact of the pandemic will be considerable, and we do really need to understand what that does mean for young people going forward. Next slide, please. And further, in terms of early help and further support for young people, lots of information being provided, a real understanding actually that the pressures that lockdown may have placed on families, and a priority applied to domestic abuse and mental health concerns, and the multi-agency early help assessment training continues to be delivered virtually, as well as other services. And further support to young people, including weekly COVID survival kits, launch of a virtual youth provision, some detached youth work being carried out in 5 areas across the borough. Next slide, please. And the contentious issue of schools and education, but the important issue. So, how many children are attending school? Well, in order to deal with the announcement that the government issued around schools opening on the 1st of June, there has continued to be a recovery group working. It was established and is working on and looking at and agreeing the arrangements for, first of all, really the priority being the phased expansion of pupil numbers, because currently schools are open. It's about attendance and attendance for those groups that can attend. So the focus really has been how do we expand the numbers of pupils initially, and there has been an increase. So pupils accessing primary schools has increased from 344 to 806. Secondary schools has increased from 77 to 136. We've increased the number of vulnerable pupils with social workers from 31 to 196, following letters to families encouraging them to attend school. And contact is being made with 1,100 families of children with a education, health and care plan, so just to understand whether any changes are needed to those plans. And in addition, we are currently arrangements are underway to distribute laptops to support those that might be those children that might be digitally disadvantaged, so that they can actually access online lessons and education via that channel. Next slide, please, Joanne. In addition, PPE for schools is on the list to be distributed on the 1st of June, so that will be supported. And in terms of early years childminder availability, 60% of early years settings are actually closed. but we anticipate that actually the remainder working to reopen from the 1st of June, and we'll need to keep an eye on that. But places are available to accommodate in the 51 settings currently open. So there are places available, and the ones that are closed are due to be reopened based on the guidance that was issued by the DFE on the 24th of May. Next slide, please, John. Next area, adult social care and public health. Again, care homes seems to be the key area at the moment in this particular theme. The total care home deaths is 156, and we believe 71 of those have been identified as COVID-19 positive, but the death rate is reducing, as is the number of residents and staff who are symptomatic. So again, our condolences go out to those that have been affected. In addition, government announced some further grants specifically for care homes, and we're due to receive nearly 1.8 million in 2 grants, one this month and one in July, which 75% of that needs to be passported straight to care homes based on their number of beds. Further support coming via the government and linked directly to supporting care homes. But in addition to that, the adult social care workforce has been responding to demand as we went through the peak and as we've come out of the peak, and still continues to do that. One of the key benefits for some of the approach that we have around the shared care record is that is helping us and is being utilised effectively to share what I was alluding to earlier around our intelligence and information where appropriate. And again, I think that's put us in a better position maybe than other areas. Next slide, please, John. Just to reinforce the role that public health has played and the Director of Public Health and her team in the response, as well as providing support to the MRF and the leadership that was required linked into the public health agenda, also the data analysis and intelligence that is coming from that team, and some of the specific service delivery around ensuring residents with drugs and alcohol problems continue to receive the support, and working with the CCG and NHS to improve the homeless health support across Merseyside. It's specialism like public health is obviously required in the response, linked into the advice and interpretation of national guidance, and it's been key, and the team have been key obviously in everything that we've been doing. Next slide, please, Joanne. And again, just 2 examples of other areas that are linked into this theme. So GP practices throughout the response, we're reviewing all vulnerable patients in the community, and actually starting to have some best interest conversations so that care plans are in that person's best interest really. The COVID-19 home visiting service, the CCG has commissioned a specific home visiting service which is there to provide some holistic care. Next slide, please, John. Next slide, please, Joanne. Sorry. And again, just a brief, so the CCG have helpfully funded 30 iPads for each care home, and again it creates and it helps build that relationship with care home residents, and supports remote mentoring and remote monitoring of COVID-19 patients. So again, use of technology being actively used. Next slide. Just to note as well in terms of financial assistance, so the usual uplift, the annual uplift has happened of fee payment increases between 4.5% and 6%. They weren't specific to or related to COVID, but it has helped the situation. And standard payments providers based on activity that predates the COVID-19 situation are being made on block and payment in advance. So it's helped ease some of the cash flow concerns for providers as we went through the peak and as we've been dealing with the response. And the council today have met COVID-related costs by asking providers to make regular claims, and then we can make payment in a timely fashion. So the assistance is there to support, and it has been quite dynamic and active. Next slide, please, Joanne. I think the only point really to make on this is that it's the last bullet really, which is integrated working in St Helens is strong and has placed us in a great position to deal with the crisis. What we've seen is because we have got an integrated workforce and it works well, that has supported us well in order to deal with anything relating to the crisis around adult social care and public health, and it places us in a great position to move forward. Next slide. In terms of community safety, so as mentioned earlier when I referenced the communication, campaigns have been developed, some targeted social media campaigns. We've worked with Merseyside Police who've supported our campaigns, and the community safety team have been supporting the police in redeploying any outreach workers to observe any key sites, mainly around social distancing issues and making sure that they are being observed. And the campaign hashtag Ready to Report has been amended to Ready to Respect, which was aimed at reducing disputes between neighbours. Next slide. So there are a number of areas of business as usual, which were assessed as part of our business continuity arrangement. So all services completed an impact analysis immediately when this was evolving, and those identified as critical created business continuity plans in accordance with our overall approach to maintain those critical functions, and that allowed us to understand, okay, what support might those services actually need, whether it's staffing via the redeployment, whether it's PPE, whether it's support via the technology and guide or any guidance on decision making. So some of the core corporate services and others have been supporting those critical services to operate in accordance with business continuity as it would be. So the main point here is that's worked well, and I'm just going to talk about what that looks like over the next few slides, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of the level of activity that looked like. So the contact centres continue to offer all of our services except face-to-face. And as per the list there, all contact centre staff have been occupied with business as usual. They've also been supporting the Community Hub and the St Helens Together approach around access to food calls, working with others. Next slide. And that support for contact cares has led to the contact centre taking around 2,243 calls. We are actually seeing, as some of the lockdown restrictions start lifting and we start opening some of our services and others up, that there's a volume that is increasing, but it's more around things like recycling and bulky waste and some of the general questions that people might have. Next slide, please, Joanne. And in terms of the support to St Helens Together, they basically there's a number of calls, 1,625 calls were received in relation specifically to the Community Hub, and the contact centre handled 1,486 of them. So again, linking back to the figures I mentioned earlier, quite a lot of inquiries around the Community Hub and support that might be required. Next slide, please. So as of yesterday, this is the contact centre top 20. and as you can see, there's been a shift really in calls now, specifically around waste, refuse, fly tipping, pest control in terms of rats in the garden, and also recycling and others. So majority of the calls have actually been around waste and household waste. So information for you there. Next slide. In terms of highways has continued to deliver. So some figures there. There's 1,223 highway repairs as we've been going through this current situation. 122 traffic signal faults have been attended and repaired. Continuation of the major junction improvements that have been planned. Next slide, please. Street lighting, 806 faults issued. So again, the actual activity in the highways function has remained, and the level of activity and the response is detailed there in the slides. Next slide. So the refuse collection, again, just linking into some of the campaigns and the information, the communication, some examples there that have been used, and images of our workforce in supporting that. Next slide. And recycling actually was scheduled to start this Monday when brown bin collections will return. Bulky waste will recommence on the 1st of June, and green bins are going to recommence around the 8th to the 15th of June. When the recycling centres were actually opened as well, there were long queues, so we're just reviewing that and understanding how we might trial increasing to 6 cars rather than 3. And there's a gradual reopening of the household waste recycling sites. Fly tipping, a number of complaints around fly tipping. I think it still remains an issue both for us and nationally, mainly due to the closure and the collection cycle. But we'll keep a watching eye on that, and as a result, we've already issued 24 notices around fly tipping. Next slide. In terms of registrars, so the registration team have continued to work. Some redeployed staff have actually been supporting them. Death registrations over the peak periods and throughout the situation have seen a very large increase on what will be the norm this time of year. And as you can see, there's a small team that have been working very hard with others to support that service. The key thing here is they've actually adapted really well to a new building, because we moved them into Wesley House, and a new way of registering where members of the public have been using different methods to communicate with them. Next slide. So just some figures just to justify where the numbers are. Overall now the numbers are decreasing, so in normal circumstances we'd register around 20 to 25 deaths per week, and you can see there that the numbers, so the 8th of May we had 33, that's now down to the weekend in the 23rd, now down to 21. There is a gradual increase in numbers, but again, I think that is plateauing now at the crematorium, which has a current capacity of 18 cremations and burials daily. But we have actually changed or offered a sort of a web streaming private live broadcast for members of the families of the bereaved and the bereaved to actually attend those ceremonies, so which appears to be working well, and is being used regularly now. Next slide, please. In terms of economy and business support, obviously this is a huge area for Place and the Place of St Helens. To date, we've made payments of 24.6 million. And that actually represents 83.2% of those that are eligible for claiming that business grant. We've sent a letter to the Secretary of State for Business re the new discretionary scheme, as it's likely that there will be a demand that which far exceeds the funding that is available. I think the economy generally and economic recovery is a key element of the next steps going forward, as we're all very aware. But I think that what this demonstrates is that throughout the peak and throughout the crisis, support has been given to those that are eligible for that support. And I'll talk shortly around the recovery aspects of economy. Next slide, please. In terms of sports facilities and physical activity, I think the key message here is that as probably there's the whole country, the online fitness seems to have become the new normal, and we fully embrace that as pre-recorded sessions have been completed. So our customers can carry out workouts whenever they want. And again, there's some stats there to show who we're reaching and how many views of our of those workouts and that support have been looked at. So we offer the support, it's there. Next slide, please, Joanne. That includes a lot of home-based gym programs and helping individuals who may have some questions around how they can keep fit. So absolutely key in terms of our residents' well-being and the support that we might give them. And in addition, that some maintenance has continued to be carried out as we've had the opportunity to do so. So the details are there in that slide. Next slide. In terms of sports development, again, just reiterate the offer that is being given, including the 50+ community sport, social distancing fitness sessions, and actually how we're engaging with schools and exploring potentially how we can deliver an annual county games from some sort of virtual world or an individual school if they've returned. Next slide. In terms of libraries, the library service digital presence has been enhanced. Again, a real example of how technology can still support service delivery. So we've the online membership has seen an increase of over 2,000 loans, which is interesting, that people are actually accessing that service, which is probably a more effective service and quick rather than handling books and other things. And home delivery is recommended that they offer services to older customers, so there's been a number of referrals around that. The St Helens Art Strategy currently going through stakeholder consultation, so again, written document expected June 2020, and our library services manager is actually part of a wider piece looking at post-COVID recovery and the library service, and that will feed into our overall approach around what recovery looks like for such services as libraries and others. Next slide, please. In terms of welfare and benefits, support and the hardship fund, so in terms of housing benefit, the caseload is slightly declining, mainly due to people claiming universal credit instead of housing benefit, but there are still currently 10,000 live claimants compared to 10,173 on the 31st of March. We've got 22 previously homeless residents in temporary hotel accommodation, and the revised local housing allowance rates have been applied to 1,700 claims. We've had, in terms of discretionary housing benefit, 226 applications received since the 1st of April 2020. And we're actually rolling forward applications for existing awards for 3 months to reduce any unnecessary customer contact at this time. But there is an anticipation that applications will increase once lockdown restrictions have been eased, and we feel the impact maybe of landlords actively pursuing rent arrears that they may have paused on during the period. Next slide. In terms of council tax reduction, we've seen a small increase in caseload with an additional 295 working age claims. We've got 91 new applications for those who've recently applied for universal credit. And in terms of the hardship fund, the government, they announced a 500 million hardship fund to deliver support to council taxpayers, which effectively means an additional £150 additional discount to all working age CTR claimants. Our allocation is 1.9 million, and there's work ongoing actually to start allocating that. The initial allocation would be 1.368 million of that overall 1.9 currently. Next slide, please. And we've currently got 5,373 children entitled to free school meals. So again, since the 31st of March, there's been an increase of 288 children, and we've got 38 new claims. That's an interesting bit of data, considering the amount of free school meals are actually being claimed from the community hub and others and schools, which has remained quite low throughout this period. So it would be interesting to see what's behind all of that. Next slide. I don't know what's happened. So the graphic at the top of that has changed, which I apologise for. But this is just an example of some of the infographics that we will be issuing in relation to the activity that's been carried out. So this just a very simple visual of actually the level of activity that has been carried out, which I've talked through, and we're using this on social media and through our other channels, which includes the calls to St Helens Together, and the number of volunteers we have, the items of PPE, etc. Next slide. Kath, you were going to talk about reset, recovery and remobilisation. I'm happy to if you wouldn't wish to carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Okay. So what I've just outlined really is lots of activity, our response to the crisis, how we've managed our response and our approach to the response through the peak, as outlined by Kath earlier in the presentation. And the focus now really is around reset, recovery and remobilisation. And the key for us in St Helens is that this is about reset. We're not recovering or aiming to recover back to how it used to be. We are aiming to reset how we do things. We will recover where we need to recover, but we will reset, we will remobilise, and we will drive through what differences that can help us deliver and what benefits that will help us deliver. Because the strengths and the challenges that were outlined at the very beginning of this presentation have probably been more enhanced and more amplified as a result of the pandemic than we expected. We thought might happen, and it's quite unprecedented that we've probably got more focus in the challenges than we have in the strengths at the moment. So our approach is reset, and we're very clear about that, both at a regional and sub-regional level as well as locally. Next slide, please, John. And the context of that is reset, also linking into our priorities and what those priorities are. So the key priorities around children and people, around good health, around safe and strong communities, around a strong, diverse, well-connected local economy, which is also supporting a green, thriving and vibrant place to be proud of, and also organisationally how we are a 21st century local authority, a modern, efficient and effective council. They are all still relevant. We need to understand what does reset look like underneath all of those, because there's a new baseline, and we need to understand what that new baseline is as a result of the crisis and the pandemic. Next slide. And a key component of that really is our financial resilience. So you can see on the slide there, our budget for 2021 provided funding for key areas, which included schools, children's, adult social care and health, public health, parks, libraries, etc. We've now got a potential funding gap of 24.7 million as a result of this crisis, and that's based on loss of income and additional cost pressures. So, and government will only be subsidising or supporting us with an element of that. So we do need to have a quite key conversation around our financial resilience, but also the budget conversation around what do we do to support some of these key areas, which will also have a new baseline and potentially new demand as a result of the pandemic. Next slide. So in order to do that, we've, as part of the governance that Kath outlined initially, and specifically the local governance that we have, we've established a COVID-19 reset and recovery coordination group. So the purpose of this meeting, this group, is to provide strategic officer leadership to determine what that response needs to look like. It's about coordination because we also have a Merseyside Resilience Forum recovery group, and we also have the city region, obviously having to think about what recovery looks like for the overall city region, specifically around economic recovery, and we need to make sure that all of that effort is coordinated, and we have both a local context and a regional context. In addition, we need to ensure that we start with this principle of St Helens Together, because St Helens Together is working. It's an approach that we can use where we can engage more openly and transparently with our communities. We can maybe use the principles of co-design to support what reset and reform potentially could look like, and it helps us work with key partners, the public businesses and the voluntary community sector. And again, I'll reiterate this last point. It's also about data insight, information, evidence gathering, analysis and intelligence, and we need to be on top of that in order to have an effective approach to this whole agenda. Next slide, please, Joanne. So what we've identified, both at the group and within the executive leadership team in the council, are some key priority themes or priority areas that we need to focus on, that need to be linked into our priorities, which I just outlined. And will support the development of a reset, recovery and remobilisation roadmap, which will enable us to track progress and to understand where we're going to get to and what our direction of travel is. So the key areas really are economic impact, support and recovery. So that is all the things around stabilisation, stimulation and development of an inclusive, a resilient and a green economy for St Helens. Providing the right support for our vulnerable residents, which includes addressing where there may be now more enhanced family poverty and worklessness, and also preventing further vulnerability. I heard on the news earlier that there's about 8.4 million people that are currently furloughed, and there's a majority of those that are already redundant. Now, what does that mean for St Helens in terms of those that are furloughed, and what does that mean for vulnerabilities generally and preventing vulnerabilities if we wish to do that in the area? Health and social care, I think the key thing for us here is around building on the successful integration that already exists with St Helens Cares, and then thinking about what does that need to look like going forward, including the further transformation or further integration. A key area around relationships and connections, and this isn't specifically just around other local authorities, other agencies, and the Merseyside and City Region agendas. This, for me, I think is more specifically around our communities, and how do we build a different and a new relationship with our communities, understanding their issues, their vulnerabilities, their needs, and how we provide the platform to support what our communities might need. The council's financial resilience, that's the next key thing, as I've just outlined. That's both revenue and capital. Our transformation, so lots and lots of different and new ways of working that have developed during our response. How do we sustain those? How do we capture what is working and what is working well? And how might we adapt to a phased relief and potentially the ramping up of the lockdown and what this means for service delivery? We are going to have to be more flexible and agile. This hasn't gone away, and listening to some of the national headlines and guidance and suggestions around local lockdowns, we need to be able to be flexible enough to respond to that if that is the way that the future looks. And there may be spikes and different phases of this crisis, but also, you know, how we exist sustainably in that environment. And again, evidence-based analysis, which is key. Next slide, please, Joanne. So in order to help the thinking around reset and recovery, all directorates within the council have been asked to use this as a basis of their thinking, which is, you know, during the crisis we started some things and we stopped some things. Did we do those things just to respond to immediate demands, but they're specific to the crisis? Or were there new things that showed some signs of promise, and do we want to carry on with that as new practice? Are there some things that we just need to stop doing because they're now unfit for purpose? And yeah, I believe there are, and it does appear there are, which is good. And what things do we actually need to restart because we stopped our focus on those things because of the crisis, but they need to be picked up in some form. So there's lots of activity at the moment across the organisation, doing that thinking in a consistent way, which we're pulling back in to support some of that roadmap and the delivery of that roadmap. Next slide, please, John. But that's also in the context of, and I'm calling this architecture. This is the architecture that exists within our sort of regional arrangements, but also our local arrangements that we've had to establish very quickly and in a very short time scale with key people actually supporting these. So at the top, we've got the Merseyside Resilience Forum and the Strategic Recovery Coordinating Group with what are a number of thematic recovery cells that have been established around community health, education, business, economy and environment and infrastructure. Now there is a piece of work at the moment around which is due to be complete by the 30th of June, linked into all of those cells around what does recovery need to look like or need to consider. And we are influencing the policy leads group at that level to support that work. But then locally, at the bottom, we've got our COVID strategic group, the Reset Recovery Coordination Group, which I've just mentioned. We've got, again, reflecting on the good practice that is happening around tracking, testing and tracing. We have our local group, which needs to support the recovery efforts. And then we have individual work that's happening at a directorate level around people, place and organisation, where a number of impact assessments are being carried out on the impact of the crisis on service delivery. The next slide, please. I'm not going to talk to this a lot, but this is just again just to illustrate the scale of activity link that needs to happen and the questions that need to be reflected upon and answered to support our actions basically around the priority areas that we have. So under promoting good health, independence and care, we need to deliver, and we will be delivering a borough level health and social care recovery plan. And under ensuring children and young people have a positive start in life, we need to understand, and we'll be doing a piece of work to do this, our new starting point, specifically around outcomes for children and young people, and what does that now look like, and ties into our overall performance agenda and improvement agenda around children and young people. In terms of safe and strong communities, again, linking into where there has been real community cohesion and community engagement, how can we build on that and sustain on that, but also how can we respond to the demand that may be currently latent around our front-facing services that needs to be reflected upon, and community safety being a key aspect in all of that. The economy priority, again, we need and will be delivering a local economy recovery plan, which feeds into those wider city region economy recovery actions. And in terms of being a modern, efficient, effective council, it's all about the new normal. It's all around organisational development and organisational design and what that will look like going forward. How that's supported with relevant support and HR policies for ways of working, and what roles will now become potentially fully agile, but also the financial resilience and the lobbying and the engagement with government around the funding and the budget pressures. But also, how do we reinstate services in a phased, planned and safe manner, which includes reviewing our current assets, our buildings, and which do we want to use and which do we no longer want to use. And that's the task in hand. And that's the presentation over, I think. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Excellent presentation. I had indications from Councillor Bell that she'd like to speak.
Hello. Can you hear me?
You're on.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very detailed, interesting, and I'm looking forward to doing some more work on that. Initially, I suppose I want to say thank you to all of the officers across the council in every area, because the response has been incredible. And in particular, my officers, Steve and Samantha, Lorraine, Lee and Jen, and the Democratic Services team, who've been a huge support for me throughout this as portfolio holder. The point that I wanted to make is that recovery and response requires very clear information and guidance in a timely way. And it's been incredibly frustrating for me as a portfolio holder, having announcements from government with no warning and very little detail until much later on, and then expecting officers of the council to respond and implement those changes rapidly, requiring a huge amount of work and additional pressure in an already crisis situation. And they have done a brilliant job of that, but make no mistake, local government is leading the response on COVID and will lead the recovery. And a good example of this is homelessness, really. So the announcement from Robert Jenrick on Sunday that 160 million was going to be provided for homelessness. That money is actually not new money. It's coming from the existing 4-year budget. So we don't know how that will impact us further down the line. And an apparent requirement for 3,300 homes to be built nationally. And it all sounds amazing, but actually what does that mean for us as a local authority in terms of implementation? And a lot of these announcements are coming in with guidance to follow. And I just don't think it's reasonable for us to expect that our vulnerable residents who are homeless or have housing need are going to be waiting for months for perhaps homes to be built in temporary accommodation and hotels. We need to know much more detail than that, and it needs to be coming through much quicker from government. But also it's a broader issue. So, you know, as well as where is the money coming from to build these houses, who is funding the additional services that will wrap around them? Because homelessness is not just about providing bricks and mortar, it's a much more complex issue. I'm really grateful for the relationships that we have in St Helens with organisations like the Hope Centre, Teardrops, YMCA, Salvation Army, as well as huge volumes of help and support from community organisations and individuals. It's enabled us to adapt very quickly to quite changing situation. But all of these wraparound services have had budget reductions previously, and will have increasing pressures during lockdown. And a perfect example is around mental health. So the Royal College of Physicians are predicting a tsunami of mental health cases following lockdown. So we know that it's not just about the pressure that we're dealing now, but it's the additional pressures that are going to come with the recovery phase. And I suppose that links to some of the work that myself and Councillor Baines did around the domestic abuse campaign and mental health, because we know they go hand in hand, and we know that it will be an additional pressure going forward. And I want to thank Councillor Baines for bringing that forward. In terms of domestic abuse, we know that there will be a surge in cases following lockdown. It's the most dangerous time to escape an abusive relationship, and our services need to be ready to absorb that additional pressure. And we are working on that currently. But again, it's this guidance from government that we need to enable us to be proactive. The Home Affairs Select Committee, which is chaired by Yvette Cooper, published a report on the 24th of April calling for a cross-government strategy that needs to extend to the period following lockdown, because that is going to be a crucial pinpoint, as I said, and the service needs will be acute. Now, we have a local domestic abuse strategy that's been implemented during lockdown, but government needs to be working with local authorities much closely in order to inform these national strategies, and it's just not happening. And of course, domestic abuse doesn't just affect adults. Children are living with domestic abuse, and those who are not already known to services are at real risk, which is why we launched the campaign that was spoken about in the presentation around targeting young people in the borough through Instagram adverts, specifically who may not be known to services. But if that's all going to happen, and we know that's going to happen as part of the recovery and the lifting of lockdown, how are government going to fund those additional pressures? Children's services are already dealing with huge pressures and budget pressures, and Councillor Charlton, knows that better than any of us really, and has fought tooth and nail to raise that at every opportunity. So thank you, Councillor Charlton, for that. And finally, I suppose from a community safety perspective, staff have worked really hard with the changing guidelines, but it's very hard to adapt to those fast changing rules and that environment. And it's made even harder still when we have a government and government advisors who are sending out mixed messages. So this can't continue long term. But thank you very much for that really detailed presentation.
Thank you, Jeannie. Well said. I've had an indication from Councillor Bowden.
Sorry, Leader. Actually, I think the points were covered in the presentation, but just to give my thanks and put a record my thanks for the hard work of those from environmental services who have risen to the challenge that they've faced over the past few months.
Thank you. Here. Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Leader, for that. Can I just reiterate what other members have said about thanks to all the staff and officers, including our partner organisations that have worked alongside Adult Health and Social Care. Pre-COVID, we'd set our budget. We knew we had growing demand in predominantly all services, but particularly in children's and adult social care. We also knew that we had to make savings, or that's what the government says they are. I refer to them as cuts. But we worked well in delivering quality services that were pertinent to the needs of our communities and put the appropriate funding in when needed. Sadly, even though we'd raised it for 10 years, that local government was being hit harder than any other public service. Local government was taking the brunt of it. And yet, a pandemic comes along and it's local government in the main that is picking up all the requests, instructions, guidance, whatever government throws at it. I'm proud to say St Helens has stood up to it with our partners around the People's Board, and that we've had established good working relationships. But make no bones about this, prior to COVID, when we sat down, we knew that a pandemic was on the verge of hitting. I said care homes was going to be the biggest challenge within adult health and social care. And sadly, that has been justified in what I said. I'm pleased to say that St Helens, whilst the numbers are high, and they're members of the people's families, they're not just numbers. They're somebody's mother and father, someone's brother and sister. But we knew that our care homes would be hit hard. Adult health and social care had well established good relationships with all our providers and deliverers of service, alongside with NHS, CCG. And I think that has put us in a better place. But nothing, no mechanisms, no practice that we have in place can make up for the blatant theft that this government and past Tory governments have actually forced on local government. It has been blatant theft, and I really do hope that they look at this open-heartedly, honestly, and justify or attempt to justify what they did to local government. I would also like to say regarding our CCG and our hospital trust, that my thanks to them, because working in that integrated fashion that we have in place has stood us in a good place. Like I've said, money will deliver more, an awful lot more, and it is money. It's not a money tree. The funding government have actually created from March to May to save their face because of the funding cuts that they actually initiated. So thank you to all the partners, social care, environment, children's care, everyone, and to all our workforce. Thank you.
Well said. Thanks, Marlene. Thanks, Marlene. Councillor Groucutt.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks for the presentation, Rob. I think the breadth of services that you've outlined that we've delivered over the last 2 months or so really demonstrates the importance of that strong and responsive back office function. So I just want to highlight and thank all the staff working in those functions. They're perhaps not as well seen, they're not public facing, but without the IT, the HR, the legal services, all of those corporate services teams, the services that the public see wouldn't be able to happen. And we had a fantastic response from all of those teams in getting thousands of colleagues up and running in a home working environment and adapting to the new reality. I think also the investment that we've made and the decisions we've taken, for example, on a £1.5 million IT investment last year, was incredibly timely and put us in really good stead to be able to keep things running. I think if this had happened a year ago, we couldn't have kept so many staff working from home and kept services running in such an efficient way. But as Rob mentioned, we have been on a journey of modernisation, recognising that things need to change. We need to be more responsive in order to deliver what the people of St Helens want. And the COVID crisis has really put a rocket under some of that work. But I want to reaffirm our commitment to that and making the council that can deliver a fairer borough and a place where people want to come and live. Just mention briefly as well, if I may, around our partnerships with the voluntary sector, which have been fantastic and performed a significant part of our response under the St Helens Together brand. We already had really good relationships. We've got a reference group bringing together voluntary sector, faith sector, social enterprises. And so having those relationships really meant we could hit the ground running and work with those partners. We provided £25,000 in funding that the leader authorised early on in the crisis to enable some of those core partners to deliver food and support. We've also seen funding from the Liverpool City region through LCR Cares. I think 67,000 has come into the voluntary sector organisations in our borough. But we appreciate things will be very difficult for many of them, and we will continue working together with our partners. We already have plans to do a new strategy this year. We want to look at volunteering. So the fact that we've now got hundreds of volunteers signed up is giving us a head start. But I just want to commit to working with the voluntary sector to develop that strategy and make sure that the incredible work in our communities, the community spirit that we knew was there already but has been really brought together during this crisis, that continues, and that we bring some positives out of what's been an awful time for our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, colleagues, for those comments. I just want to, before we agree that, presumably, I just want to say thank you to all our fantastic council staff. They are all key workers. They're the people we clap on a Thursday night. You've absolutely gone above and beyond, all our fantastic staff in every department, and I think everyone is in awe of the amazing work that's took place. It's been mentioned, the St Helens Together campaign, and the name is here to stay, and it is here to stay. I've made that clear to Kath and to Rob. We're due to publish a new council plan. We'll be going out to consultation on that in the weeks and months ahead, and I want St Helens Together to be the heart of that. I want it to be, dare I say, our own unique, better version of the Wigan deal, which is well known across local government. It has to be the heart of everything we do, and as Kate's just said about the volunteering, and the importance of working with people. When we work together, we achieve more than we do alone. Rob mentioned financial resilience, which is really important. If we are going to reset and recover as well as we want to, and as well as residents need us to, we need all these essential services that Rob has discussed to be properly financed and properly funded. We've currently got a £25 million funding gap around that we're looking at due to our fight against COVID-19. There's cross-party support for government to act and to give us that funding that we need, that certainty, and I'm grateful to the leaders of the Conservative, Liberal Democrat, Green and Independent groups who co-signed a letter with me to Robert Jenrick, the Secretary of State for Local Government, calling on him to provide the funding certainty that we do need. And the leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Marlene Jones, even appeared on BBC Newsnight with myself saying how important it was that our services are properly funded. This week as well, we've launched the LCR Fights Back campaign. You can find out more about that at sthelens.gov.uk/LCR Fights Back. As I say, council staff are among those that we clap on a Thursday night. We cannot turn our backs on them the next day. We need proper funding, and the essential services that Rob has set out in great detail need to be properly funded. People rely on them. They're too important to let go. Okay, thank you, everyone. There's no further comments. Is it agreed to note that report?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, everyone. Item 5 is performance indicators and target setting reports. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add my thanks to what everybody said, to all the staff and all the partners that we work with for the huge efforts over the past few months. It's been an incredible response to a really dire situation. So thanks to everybody. Turning to this report, its primary purpose is to provide assurance to the Cabinet of the Council's ongoing commitment to the continued delivery of strong and effective performance management processes and reporting arrangements. It's a fundamental measure of Council performance in every area. This particular report is obviously presented with a huge caveat. The present crisis has significantly impeded the Council's current ability to set meaningful targets and review its measures of performance. The overwhelming majority of indicators are impacted to varying degrees by the current situation. In light of this, future performance management arrangements will need to be a key consideration of the Council's reset and recovery process. As soon as is meaningfully possible, the range of indicators and associated targets will be reviewed and impact assessed. That will ensure a clear line of sight to the new priorities and desired outcomes of the forthcoming Council plan, which in turn will also require review / consultation as part of reset and recovery activity. The effect of COVID-19 on the new priorities and desired outcomes cannot be underestimated. As the Council establishes and implements its reset and recovery plans, having an objective measure of how these plans are working is fundamental. We will be living in a new normal, and Rob's already pointed to that, and therefore we will need to refocus our sights on establishing the effectiveness of our response to that new normal. The review and refinement of the existing performance management framework and the processes will of course be ongoing. It remains a critical element for the achievement of the desired outcomes both for the organisation and the wider community, even more so now in light of the current crisis. The performance tables in Appendix 1 to this report, set out by portfolio at page 23, show the draft range of indicators for 2020-2021. Caution needs to be applied as nearly all measures have been rolled forward from the previous financial year. Many of them form part of national reporting requirements from government, and this will undoubtedly continue. However, all of them will now require careful review. The performance tables show historic performance over a 3-year period and a projection or provisional outturn for 2019-2020. Final outturn performance will be reported where possible to Cabinet in July. A single year target for 2020-2021 has been included, but again, most targets have been rolled forward and will be reviewed as soon as we can do that. The recommendation is to delegate to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leaders of the Council, Executive Directors and Portfolio holders the ability to undertake a wholesale review / impact assessment of the Council's performance network in line with A, the Council's plans for recovery from the present COVID crisis, and B, the agreed priorities and following consultation, desired outcomes of the draft Council plan that the leaders referred to. There'll then be a further review and submission for full approval. So with that, Chair, I recommend the report to Cabinet.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bond. I've not had any indications anyone wants to speak, so is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agreed. Item 6 is Heritage Strategy. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Leader. Heritage is very important to the people of our borough. We have a proud history from sites such as the historic Sankey Canal to the world-renowned sculpture of Dream. From the miners to the glassmakers, our motto is quite aptly ex terra lucem. Over the past few months, many of us have visited and explored the beautiful sites our borough has to offer as part of our exercise plans during the lockdown, maybe a bit more than usual. Beautiful areas such as the Dream, Carmel Dam, Sankey Valley and the Sankey Canal, the summit of Billinge Hill, which of course is the highest point in Merseyside, maybe around the Nine Arches in Newton, or the wonderful treasure that is Victoria Park. Maybe you came across the Workers' Memorial statue in Vera Page Park, a thoughtfully sculptured testimony to our forebearers who gave so much to contribute to our great towns. The paper before you, Cabinet, presents the St Helens Borough Heritage Opportunities document, which has been put together to assess the borough's heritage assets, to advise how they can be used more effectively to help communities celebrate local history and, importantly, identity, as well as boost visitor economy and town centre regeneration prospects. Feeding into a wider strategy which links heritage with arts, events and volunteering, the document produced before the onset of the coronavirus will allow the council to look at how organised heritage attractions, sites and places of interest and historical importance can be used as part of the long-term future of the local visitor economy scene. The report describes short to medium targets to establish a St Helens Borough plaque scheme, improve heritage signage and markers, and work with the English Cities Fund to ensure that heritage and arts are considered part of regeneration plans. It also points to the long-awaited completion of a Haydock industrial trail, which I am obviously particularly pleased to see, a marker to celebrate historic Haydock and the contribution of Yickers to our borough over the years. But I'm sure Councillor Bond will have a word or two to say on this particular item. But it isn't only Haydock though, as the report does point to the introduction of 4 more new heritage trails around St Helens. The document shows this Labour Council's commitment to celebrate our heritage following the recent announcement of our plans to bring the iconic Gamble Building and Earlstown Town Hall back into public use. St Helens is a borough built on heritage. It's important, whilst it's important to look forward, we must also ensure that our incredible past is part of what can be an exciting future as we look to build on all of our strengths. Our heritage is important to us and we do need to celebrate it more throughout the borough. We should be proud to have so many wonderful sites, parks, open spaces and landmarks all within a few miles of each other, which may not have been used to their full potential. So now is the time to capitalise on these assets, to ensure the public are able to get the most out of them and ensure future generations know what an extraordinary place our borough really is. And for anybody watching, I would encourage you to have a look at the document, to look at some of the fantastic proposals. It would be great to get everybody involved and look at how we can celebrate our past whilst embracing our future. So finally, Leader, I'd like to thank everyone involved who put this paper together, who have worked up the schemes and contributed so much, especially Steve Lingard from SG Lingard, who produced the document, and officers of the council such as Sarah Bullock and Gary Connolly and the team. More widely, I would like to thank all of those in our borough who have a passion for our heritage and a passion for the arts, and those who work and volunteer in these sectors, and indeed everyone who's passionate about the borough of St Helens. So the recommendations are included in the covering paper, and these are to publish the St Helens Borough Heritage Opportunities document produced by SG Lingard, to note that my title has been changed to include arts and heritage to reflect their importance to this Labour Council and to our borough, and to agree to produce a coordinated delivery plan for culture, bringing together recommendations of the heritage strategy, the art strategy, the event strategy and voluntary sector strategy, linking in also to the regeneration work of the Town Centre Deal Board and COVID-19 reset and recovery plans. And so I move this report and ask for Cabinet's agreement. Thank you, Chair.
If you're saying that the message was so unclear,
Thanks very much, Councillor Baines. I can hear Boris in the background. I think you might have him on a bit too loud.
No, I haven't got Boris on, I promise you.
Have you not? Okay. Okay, I've got an indication from Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I give this particular item a warm welcome. It's been long in the gestation, this particular issue. And as Anthony's mentioned, thanks should be given to Steve Lingard and his co-authors and everyone who assisted them. I will declare that I spoke at length to Steve about my interest in industrial and political history alongside my very personal interest in the Irish diaspora in St Helens. And we shouldn't also forget that Councillor Derek Long at his time as leader commissioned the report, so I want to say thank you to Derek as well. As Anthony said, there are 10 aims detailed in the report, and some of them in the post-COVID world will be really challenging. Community engagements and activity, therefore, will play a significant role, I think, as we set this forward. You know, we're set to get 10 years of underfunding, as Marlene mentioned, and the government now looks to be reneging on its funding promises over the cost of COVID. So, you know, the resources that we have across the north, really, and particularly in Liverpool City region, are already under strain. But as our community response to this crisis has shown, we live in groups of communities who desperately care about each other, and in particular those less fortunate. We owe it to ourselves as we recover to galvanise that community spirit, and Kate's mentioned that, and we should continue to engage in projects that show there are more things that unite us than divide us. And our shared heritage is surely one of the things that unites all our communities. Like Anthony, I'm pleased to see the inclusion of the completion of the Haydock Heritage Trails at page 34 of the report. And thanks for the significant work on that already done, particularly to 2 Yickers, Colin Rooney and Gary Connolly, both former pitmen, and an adopted Yaker, the distinguished local historian John Alexander. I'm looking forward to seeing them and walking the trails once they're able to be completed. I equally welcome the recommendation to finalise and adopt the master planning for Haydock, Rainhill and Earlstown, but particularly Haydock. Obviously, the ECF deal to regenerate the borough will have a significant impact on the master planning, and again, I look forward to seeing what that brings from a heritage perspective as well as regeneration. I'd like to just say a couple of things about the proposed plaque scheme. I live around the corner from the birthplace of one of our most famous residents, Richard Seddon, the 15th Prime Minister of New Zealand. That's commemorated by a plaque. And by the way, what a fantastic Prime Minister they've got at the moment in New Zealand compared to us. And the people of New Zealand rightly celebrate his life, and it's the life of a remarkable St Helena. And we've got many famous daughters and sons of the borough that aren't fully recognised. We regularly celebrate names like Lily Parr, Rick Astley, Jackie Abbott, Mike Pennington, and the indomitable Steve Prescott, and rightly so. But having blue plaques will also allow us to shine a light on people like Nuala the Dormile, the acclaimed Gaelic poet whose work has been translated from the original Irish by Seamus Heaney, George Groves, the movie sound pioneer, and Peter Clark, aka Budgie from Susie and the Banshees, an old college mate of Councillor Cunliffe's, I believe. These people have had a worldwide impact on the arts, and we should give due recognition. And I must confess that, like Councillor Bowden, I love Susie and the Banshees. Whether we realise it or not, our past informs our present and our future. For those of us living in Victorian terraced housing, the location, design and size of our homes has for many been dictated by how their proximity to the closest pit. The smaller the pit cottage, the closer the pit. The bigger and further away, normally up the hill from the pit head, the more generous the accommodation until we finally get to the mansions. That's a journey from the pit head to the colliers' cramped cottages with little sanitation, to the spacious managers' houses, to the owner's sumptuous villas. There's a hierarchy, if ever there was one. I could, but I won't go on about the many aspects of the report and how our present is affected by our past. What I will say is that our future can be moulded by a celebration of that past. We have a tendency to do our place down. We should celebrate where we come from and let everyone else know how proud of it we are. So thanks, Anthony, for bringing this, and I really look forward to working with you to make this strategy a reality.
Excellent. Well said, Councillor Bond. Councillor McCauley.
Okay. Are we on? Yeah. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I echo those. I won't linger on, you'll be pleased to hear. But I just wanted to pay thanks, first of all, to you, Anthony, for bringing this forward. I know you've been driving this through. So, first of all, thanks to you. Thanks to Steve Lingard and his team for an excellent document. And it was a fantastic read as well, wasn't it? And just reading through that, what a borough of first, and just read through the documents. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. But one thing you can rest assured now, we've got this document, and I hope the rest of Cabinet support it, because we can use the building blocks that's in this document as a springboard forward within our generation. It meant on 2.8 they said we'll work with English Cities Fund to do that, but we can do much more than that, personally and individually, and every decision we make as council. If you can't see where you've come from, you've no chance of knowing where you're going to. So I think this will really help us to unlock our potential as a borough, and I think it's a great document and long overdue. Like I said, thanks to Derek Long originally for commissioning this report, and let's do it justice. Let's see some of the short, medium and long-term goals. Let's get them done. So I'll be supporting this. And thanks again, Anthony.
Yeah, well said. And just before I bring Councillor Baines back in, just to sum up, and then we'll take the vote. I just want to thank Steve Lingard as well. I also want to thank Councillors Bond and McCauley who've just spoken, because the Workers' Memorial statue that Councillor Baines mentioned is actually there thanks to largely the work of Councillors Bond and McCauley. So thank you both for that stunning recognition of our industrial heritage, our proud industrial heritage. We have got, as Councillor Baines said, we've got so much to be proud of in St Helens Borough, from our iconic buildings like the Gamble and the Earlstown Town Hall that we will bring back into full public use, to our outstanding industrial and cultural past. As the report makes clear, our borough is made up of many very different communities, from Haydock, where I grew up, to places like Rainhill, Rainford, Newtonley, Willows and so on. So in addition to the immediate recommendations and medium long-term goals of the report, I can also confirm that we're going to be using the title St Helens Borough Council on all our correspondence from now on. At the moment the logo and the crest just says St Helens Council, but I want it to say Borough because we are a proud borough. As we reset and rebuild the council in the post-COVID world, which we've talked about a lot today, we need to make sure heritage is at the heart of that, and the ECF deal that several colleagues have alluded to is going to be key to that, and heritage has to play a really key part. Councillor Baines, thanks for bringing the report. I'll hand back to you to sum up.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader, for that. Yeah, and thanks also to Martin and to Richard for your contributions too. Yeah, you know, it's great to hear it, and I'm very surprised, Richard, that we didn't hear your tale about if you could come on holiday to St Helens, you would do, because you normally say it at every opportunity. But yeah, seriously, thanks for the comments, and I was really welcoming to hear about the St Helens Borough strategy, because one of the things that the strategy does pick out is our identity as a borough. You mentioned Haydock, where I live here, and that's very important to the people of Haydock, as it is important to the people of Rainhill and other areas in Billings too. So yeah, so thanks to everybody, and I hope the Cabinet can fully support this item.
Thanks, Councillor Baines. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, everyone. Last item on the agenda, item 7, is full adoption of local flood risk management strategy 2019 to 2025. Councillor Bowden.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for saving the best till last. This report today is to seek approval to adopt the St Helens Local Flood Risk Management Strategy 2019 to 2025 and the Sustainable Drainage Systems Guide. We have a legal duty for cooperation and leadership of flood risk management, and this strategy is designed to help us as a local authority and other relevant delivery bodies understand and manage flood risk at a local level. It will also be used in future for planning decisions and flood risk management and investment decisions. It's our second local flood risk management strategy, and if agreed today, replaces the previous strategy that expires this year. It reflects the most up-to-date guidance and evidence, new duties and legislation changes, and provides a revised work plan for the next investment period. To accompany the strategy, officers have also developed a Sustainable Drainage Systems Guide, referred to as Suds, that puts in place policies that will ensure that new developments accord with DEFRA's technical standards. Our Suds guidance that I'm asking for approval today will mean that development must take an increasing, greener and more ecologically friendly approach to managing water on site, and it will therefore greatly benefit our current and future residents and businesses as we look to grow and expand the borough. The responses, the public consultation ran for 8 weeks in total from November through to January, and the responses are incorporated within the report. The Council receives a grant of approximately £160,000 per year to manage the function, but there is currently no budgetary provision with the Council's capital programme for flood rig draining improvement works or general maintenance of the water course, and I would envisage that this situation will be compounded by the current crisis and the potential impact and likely impact of this government's decisions on future funding. So the policies within the document will form the basis for future grant applications and capital allocations, and they'll inform the planning and development process and set high standards for development in the borough. Therefore, I would like to ask you to consider and approve the policy, the new guidance, and support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. It's great news in particular about the impact on development. It's fantastic news. Is that agreed, everybody?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, and thanks colleagues and thanks staff for facilitating this afternoon's meeting. I'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.